My name is Elena Carter. I'm 37 years old now. 20 years ago, my parents threw me out of their house because I was pregnant. I was 16 years old. It was February 2005, cold enough that the air hurt when you breathed in. I remember standing on the front porch with a backpack, a plastic grocery bag full of clothes, and the sound of my mother locking the door behind me, not closing it, locking it. That sound stayed with me longer than anything else. My father's last words that night were simple. You made your choice, now live with it. The father of my baby was a boy named Daniel Ortiz. Daniel wasn't rich. His father worked construction, his mother cleaned houses, and they lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the south side of town. To my parents, that meant he was beneath us. My father owned a private medical clinic. My mother ran charity events and church committees. Our family had a reputation to maintain, and a pregnant 16-year-old daughter didn't fit into that picture. The night I told them, everything collapsed in less than 10 minutes. We were sitting at the dining table, my father reading emails on his phone, my mother talking about an upcoming hospital fundraiser. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip my water glass just to stop them. I need to tell you something, I said. My mother looked up immediately. My father didn't. What is it, Elena? I'm pregnant. The silence that followed felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My father slowly lowered his phone. Who is the father? Daniel. His eyes hardened instantly. The mechanic's son? He's not a mechanic, I said quietly. He works part-time at the shop. That's the same thing. My mother's voice came next. You're getting rid of it. It wasn't a question. I'm not. My father pushed his chair back so violently it scraped across the floor. You will not bring that embarrassment into this house. It's my baby. It's a mistake. I remember looking at them both, realizing something I hadn't understood before. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about themselves. What will people say? My mother whispered. That sentence sealed my fate. Within an hour, my father had packed my bag himself. No yelling, no crying, just cold efficiency. You are not raising that child under my roof, he said. My mother walked me to the door. She didn't hug me. She didn't say goodbye. She just pointed outside. You've chosen that life, she said. Go live it. I slept that night on Daniel's couch. His mother found me there the next morning. Instead of yelling or judging me, she wrapped me in a blanket and said something I will never forget. We'll figure it out. 3 words. More kindness than my own parents had shown me in 16 years. Daniel tried. He really did. He worked longer hours at the repair shop. I finished high school through night classes, while his mother watched the baby during the evenings. But life doesn't always reward good intentions. Our son, Mateo Ortiz, was born in September. 7 pounds, 8 ounces. Dark hair, big brown eyes. The first time I held him, I promised something silently. No one will ever make you feel unwanted. For a while, things were okay. Not easy, but okay. Daniel and I shared a tiny studio apartment above a convenience store. The ceiling leaked during heavy rain, and the heater barely worked in winter. But we were together. We were trying. Then, when Mateo was 3 years old, everything changed. Daniel left for work one morning and never came home. A drunk driver hit his car at an intersection 3 blocks from the shop. He was 22. I was 19, and suddenly I was alone with a toddler and $400 in my bank account. That was the hardest year of my life. I worked mornings at a diner and nights cleaning offices downtown. Mateo slept in a small playpen in the corner of the diner kitchen while I worked early shifts. The owner pretended not to notice. Sometimes I'd watch other families come in for breakfast. Fathers holding their children, mothers laughing, and I'd wonder if my parents ever thought about me, if they ever wondered what happened after they closed that door. But I never called them. Not once, because I knew the answer already. We didn't exist to them anymore. Years passed. Slowly, painfully, things got better. I took online classes whenever Mateo slept, first bookkeeping, then accounting. Numbers made sense. They followed rules. People didn't. By the time I was 26, I had a stable job at a small financial firm. By 30, I had my own apartment and a quiet life. But the real miracle wasn't me. It was Mateo. He was brilliant. Not the kind of smart that shows off, the quiet kind. He loved science. He took apart broken electronics just to see how they worked. At 17, he built a working computer from discarded parts people had thrown away. At 22, he earned a full scholarship to one of the best universities in the state. The day his acceptance letter arrived, he ran into the kitchen waving it. "Mom, I got in!" I hugged him so tightly he laughed. "You always knew you would." I didn't tell him the truth. I had never doubted him, but I had doubted the world. People like my parents believed success belonged only to certain families, certain names, certain neighborhoods. Mateo proved them wrong every single day. He graduated at 22 with top honors. By 25, he was working at one of the largest medical technology companies in the region. Ironically, the same healthcare network my father's old clinic eventually merged into. I didn't think much about it at the time. Life had moved on. 20 years had passed since that cold February night. 20 years since my parents erased me. Then one morning, everything changed. It started with a phone call. Mateo's voice sounded different, excited. "Mom, guess what happened today?" "What?" "I got promoted." "That's amazing. To what?" "You're not going to believe this. Try me. I'm now head of operations for the entire network division." I froze. "That's huge, Mateo. It means I'll be overseeing all the smaller clinics that joined the system. That's incredible." Then he said something that made my heart stop. "There's one clinic in particular they want me to review first." "Which?" He read the name from a document. "Carter Medical Associates." My father's clinic, the one he'd spent his whole life building. The same clinic that eventually had been bought by the healthcare network Mateo now worked for. Apparently, the current management has been struggling. They want me to step in and reorganize things. I couldn't speak, because I knew something Mateo didn't. My parents still worked there. They had refused to retire. Their entire identity was tied to that place. And now, the son they never wanted to exist had just become their boss. When Mateo finished telling me about the promotion, I tried to sound calm, proud, supportive, normal. But inside, something old had started moving again, something I thought I had buried 20 years ago. I knew exactly what Carter Medical Associates was. It wasn't just a clinic. It was my father's kingdom. My father, Richard Carter, had built that place from nothing. At least, that's the story he loved to tell everyone. The hardworking doctor who created a respected medical practice in the center of the city. But there was another truth he never told people. The truth that his daughter once stood on the front porch of that same clinic after school, waiting for him to finish work so she could get a ride home. The truth that he once told me I would someday inherit it. And the truth that he erased me from his life the moment I became inconvenient. Mateo had no idea. I had never told them their names, not because I was protecting them, but because I refused to let their rejection become part of his identity. As far as Mateo knew, my parents had simply cut contact when I was young. Nothing more. "Mom," he said through the phone, "you're quiet." "I'm just proud of you," I said softly. "When do you start?" "Next week. I'm meeting the management team Monday morning." Monday. 4 days away. I looked out the kitchen window while we talked. Matean had grown into the kind of man I always hoped he would become. Kind, intelligent, calm. Nothing like the cold world he had been born into. "You're going to do amazing," I told him. "I hope so," he said. Then he laughed. "Apparently, the clinic has 2 older administrators who refuse to adapt to any modern systems." Something twisted in my chest. "Really?" "Yeah, a husband and wife team who have been there forever. The board said they've been difficult." I didn't need to hear the names. I already knew. After we hung up, I sat at the table for a long time. 20 years. 20 years since the last time I saw my parents. The last image I had of them was my mother pointing toward the street and telling me to leave. I wondered if they ever regretted it, or if they simply rewrote history the way people like them always did. Maybe they told everyone I had run away. Maybe they said I chose a bad life. Maybe they pretended they never had a daughter at all. 4 days later, Monday morning arrived. Mateo insisted I come with him to celebrate his first official day afterward. Dinner somewhere nice. But first, he had meetings all morning. "I'll call you when I'm done." "Good luck." "Don't worry," he replied with a confident smile. He left his apartment looking sharp in a dark suit and carrying a leather folder. I watched him walk toward the elevator. And for the first time in years, I thought about driving to that clinic. Just to see. Just to know. But I didn't. Some doors stay closed for a reason. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. "Mateo." "And?" I answered. "You are not going to believe this." My heart started beating faster. "What happened?" "The place is a disaster." I couldn't help a small laugh. "Really?" "Mom, they're running patient records on paper files from the 90s. The billing system is outdated. Half the staff look terrified to speak." That sounded exactly like my father. Control through fear. "And the administrators?" I asked carefully. Mateo exhaled slowly. "That's the weird part." "What do you mean?" "They acted like I insulted him just by being there." "What happened?" I introduced myself, explained the restructuring plan, and the older man looked at me like I was a child. My father had always hated being challenged. He actually said something strange. "What?" He said, boys your age shouldn't be telling experienced doctors how to run a clinic. I closed my eyes. That was him. Exactly him. "So what did you say?" Mateo's voice was calm. I reminded him that the board put me in charge of operations for the entire network. And? And he didn't like that. I could picture my father's face perfectly. Red, tight, angry. My mother sitting beside him pretending to be calm while silently agreeing with every word he said. "They asked about my background," Mateo continued. My stomach tightened. "What did you tell them?" "Just the usual, education, previous projects, my promotion." "And?" "They kept staring at me like they were trying to place me." Of course they were. Mateo had my eyes, and something about his smile always reminded people of Daniel. "You should have seen the woman. She kept whispering to the man during the meeting." My mother. I could almost hear her voice. Cold, judging, planning. "What happens now?" "Well, I gave them 2 weeks to start implementing the new systems." "Only 2? Mom, they've had years to modernize. The board is losing money because of them." He paused for a moment. "Honestly, if things don't improve, I might have to replace them." Replace them. The words echoed in my mind. 20 years ago, my parents had thrown away their daughter because she embarrassed them. Now, the grandson they never knew existed had the power to end their careers. "Mom?" Mateo said again. "Yes?" "You're sounding strange today." "I'm just thinking." "About what?" I hesitated.
There was a moment when I almost told him everything about the night I was thrown out, about the clinic, about who those two administrators really were. But then I stopped, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. And sometimes the truth has its own timing. "I'm thinking about how proud Daniel would be of you," I said quietly. Matteo went silent for a moment. "Yeah," he said softly. "I wish he could see this. So do I." Before hanging up, Matteo added something that made my heart race again. "Oh, by the way." "What?" "The clinic is holding a staff meeting next week." "For what?" "To announce their restructuring officially." "That makes sense." "They asked me to speak." "Of course they did." "And the administrators will be there too." I gripped the phone tighter because suddenly I knew something with absolute certainty. Next week, my parents were going to stand in a room full of employees and listen to a young man give orders, a young man they once decided should never exist. What none of them knew yet was that the real story was only beginning.
The day of the staff meeting arrived faster than I expected. Matteo called me that morning while I was making coffee. "You should come tonight," he said. "To the meeting?" "Yeah, it's more like a presentation for the staff. Afterwards, they're having a small reception." I hesitated. For 20 years, I had avoided that place, avoided the people who had erased me from their lives like I was a mistake they could simply delete. But now my son stood at the center of their world. "I don't know, Matteo," I said. "Come on, Mom, it's important to me." His voice softened. "You've been there for every step of my life. I'd like you there for this one, too." I stared at the coffee slowly swirling in my mug. Maybe this was the moment life had been quietly preparing for all along. "All right," I said finally. "I'll come." The clinic looked almost exactly the same when I arrived that evening. Same brick building, same glass entrance doors, same sign with the name Carter Medical Associates carved into polished metal. For a moment, I couldn't move. Memories rushed back all at once. Standing outside as a teenager, waiting for my father, running up the stairs 2 at a time to surprise him after school, believing this place would one day be part of my future. Instead, it had become the symbol of the day my family disappeared. "Mom?" Matteo's voice broke through my thoughts. He was walking toward me across the parking lot, adjusting the sleeve of his suit. "You made it!" I forced a smile. "Wouldn't miss it." He hugged me quickly, then looked at the building. "Ready?" I nodded. But inside, my heart was pounding harder than it had in years. The conference room was already filled when we entered. Doctors, nurses, administrative staff, nearly 30 people sitting in rows of chairs facing a small stage and projector screen. At the front of the room stood 2 familiar figures, older now. My father's hair completely gray, my mother's posture still perfectly straight, her expression sharp and controlled. For a moment, neither of them noticed me. Their attention was on Matteo, and the moment my father saw him walking toward the stage, I saw something flash across his face. Recognition, not full understanding, but something unsettling, like a memory he couldn't quite place. Matteo stepped up to the podium while quiet conversation faded across the room. "Good evening, everyone," he began confidently. "My name is Matteo Ortiz. As most of you know, I've recently been appointed head of operations for the network division overseeing this clinic." A few polite claps followed. My father didn't clap. He watched Matteo the way a man watches something that threatens his control. Matteo continued. "I've spent the last week reviewing the clinic's structure, and there are some changes we need to implement moving forward." Slides appeared behind him. Updated systems, new procedures, staff restructuring. Nothing unreasonable, nothing personal, just progress. But I could see my father growing more irritated with every minute. Finally, he stood up. "Excuse me," he said loudly. The room went silent. Matteo paused. "Yes, Dr. Carter?" My father crossed his arms. "I've been running this clinic for 35 years. "That's impressive," Matteo said calmly. "And suddenly someone half my age arrives telling us how to do our jobs?" Matteo didn't raise his voice. He simply answered,
The healthcare board asked me to modernize the network, and this clinic is part of that network. My mother leaned toward my father, whispering something in his ear. Then she spoke. Perhaps the board should have chosen someone with more life experience. A few uncomfortable glances passed between staff members. Mateo rested his hands lightly on the podium. I respect the experience here, he said, but the data shows the clinic has been losing efficiency for years. My father laughed sharply. Efficiency? His eyes moved across the room, looking for agreement. Then something happened that changed everything. He looked toward the back of the room, toward me. For a moment, his expression froze. My mother followed his gaze, and when she saw me standing there by the wall, the color drained from her face. 20 years vanished in an instant. I watched them recognize me, the daughter they had thrown away, the mistake they thought had disappeared. Neither of them spoke, but their eyes slowly moved from me back to Mateo, and in that moment, understanding began to form. Mateo noticed the silence. He looked toward where my parents were staring. Then he saw me. "Mom?" he said, surprised. The entire room turned toward me. I stepped forward slowly. My heels echoed across the quiet room as I walked closer to the stage. Mateo looked confused. "What's going on?" I stopped beside him and placed a hand gently on his arm. "It's time you knew something," I said softly. I turned to face my parents. Their expressions were no longer angry. They were terrified. 20 years ago, I said clearly so everyone could hear, these two people decided their pregnant 16-year-old daughter was too embarrassing to keep. Whispers spread through the room. My father's mouth opened slightly. "Ella." But I didn't stop. They threw her out of their house on a winter night and never asked what happened to her or the baby she was carrying. Mateo stared at me, and slowly, at them, realization hit him like a shockwave. "You're saying—" I nodded. "Yes." My voice stayed calm. "These are your grandparents." The room erupted with stunned murmurs. My mother looked like she might collapse. My father stood frozen, unable to speak. Mateo turned toward them slowly. The same calm expression he always carried returned to his face. But this time there was something colder behind it. "You mean," he said quietly, "the child you wanted erased," he gestured to himself, "is the one running your clinic?" Neither of them answered. They couldn't. Mateo looked around the room once, then back at them. "Thank you for your input earlier," he said professionally, "but the restructuring will continue." He paused. "And, as of today, the board has approved new leadership for this clinic." My father's voice finally came out. "You can't—" "I can," he said simply. He stepped down from the stage and stood directly in front of them. "You built this place," he said calmly, "but you also built the environment that nearly destroyed it." My mother's voice trembled. "Mateo, we didn't know—" "That I existed?" Silence. He nodded once. "That seems to be a pattern." Then he turned back toward the staff. "The clinic will move forward under new management." And just like that, the power my parents had held for decades was gone. As people slowly began talking again, Mateo walked back to me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled softly. "You know," he said, "I always wondered why you never talked about your parents." I exhaled slowly. "I wanted you to grow without their shadow." He looked across the room one last time. My parents stood alone now, small, powerless. Finally, he turned back to me. "Well," he said gently, "looks like life had other plans." And for the first time in 20 years, I walked out of that building without feeling like the girl who had been thrown away.